Hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I'm your host, as always, Nathan, and today I'm coming at you with the final version of my division by division grading and ranking of each team in the NFL's draft class. Today we're doing the AFC West, and we start off with a doobie. But before we get into that, I am going to go ahead and ask you to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos as well. And oh boy, when I said we were starting with a doozy, we're starting with a doozy. And that is with the 12th pick, the Denver Broncos selected Bo Nix, a quarterback out of Oregon. And if you've watched my other videos, you know how incredibly rare it is for me to give out an F grade. But this was such a massive reach that that's what this was. This was an F pick. Now, I also want to say right here before we go into talking about why I didn't like Bo Nix all that much, there is pretty obviously some nuance with this pick. Bo Nix fits the Sean Payton scheme very well. I think they have a decent enough offensive line, and I think the receiving core is actually pretty solid. Even though they did trade Jerry Jeudy, I still think the receiving core is good enough to where you'll be able to get production out of a rookie like Bo Nix. My main contention with the upside of Bo Nix is best case scenario, he's still probably not a top 12 quarterback in the NFL for me. I don't see that kind of upside. Bo Nix was my QB 7, I believe. I did not see a ton of upside for him as a player. I thought he was someone who was going to bounce around the league for a very long time as like the ideal backup quarterback, like a Teddy Bridgewater or a Ryan Fitzpatrick sort of player. But I just don't see the legitimate like Pro Bowl caliber or even just big time upside potential with this pick. I think best case scenario, he's someone that is too good for you to take a risk on drafting a quarterback in the middle of the first round, but too bad for you to like actually win a playoff game or do anything like that. Andy Dalton is another, I think, good comparison of kind of where I see him for when Andy Dalton was starting for the Bengals for like 8 straight years. And they made the playoffs for like 6 of those 8 years or something like that and never won a single game. That's kind of what I see out of Bo Nix. Like, when it comes down to it, Bo Nix is not going to ever be a quarterback that I think is going to win you a football game. Now, could I be wrong? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm wrong all the time. I had Josh Allen as a second-round prospect, okay? So I'm wrong all the time. And Justin Herbert as well, another Oregon quarterback that I was very much not a fan of. But both of those quarterbacks that I used as examples of me being wrong, Josh Allen and Justin Herbert, had elite tools. Bo Nix has a below-average NFL arm and is a, I would say, above-average athlete for the quarterback position at the NFL level. But he's certainly not someone that teams are going to actively take account of his legs in the run game. That's not something that he's going to do at the next level. So we're combining what I think was a very, very good support system around him at Oregon with a very, very simple offensive game plan that did not ask him to do a whole lot, along with a lack of physical tools. I mean, I had a top 100 grade on him, meaning his value as a player would be from pick 76 to 100, and that would be a pick at value. So that is a 4-tier reach, because after top 100, it goes top 75, top 50, top 40, top 20, which is where he was selected. So that's 4 tiers between where his value as a prospect was to me and where he was selected. And Because of that, even though I do think the floor is still probably a quality backup quarterback, because it's just such a massive reach for me, the grade is an F. This is, at least in terms of all of the picks that I remember grading, the only F I've given out this year, meaning that this was the worst pick of the draft. And I don't know if it's going to end up being the worst pick of the draft, but the way that my system of grading works, this is the worst pick of the draft. However, I'm not going to be nearly as negative for the rest of this draft class. But that first pick was a doozy. Moving on, you did not have a second round pick. Your third round selection, Jonah Ellis, an edge rusher out of Utah. The grade's a B. I had a top 100 grade on him. I'm not sure he's an every down player, but I do think he is someone who is going to be productive off the edge. A similar sort of player to that kid, Nick Bitonio, I think was his name, out of Oklahoma, you took last year. So I kind of like that you're keeping similar body sets here and similar roles. I do think Bitonio had way more upside than Jonah Ellis, just from an athletic perspective. However, Jonah Ellis, I think, is going to be able to step in as a rotational pass rusher year one and contribute. Your fourth round selection was a very, very good pick, not just because you drafted his quarterback, but also just for value. At pick 102 in the fourth round, you guys selected Troy Franklin, a wide receiver out of Oregon. Now, I had him graded as a top 75 grade. You took him in the fourth round. That is a 2-tier value, making the grade an A-. So I was not on the Troy Franklin hype train. A lot of people, especially early on in the process, were like, "Oh, this guy's a first-round pick, lock. Like this guy's going probably somewhere in the top 25." And I was not on that hype train. I didn't get it, especially when I actually went and watched the film. I think he's a good player with strong wide receiver 2 upside. However, he's not as fast as people think he is. And he's really, really small. I do think that this is someone who is going to struggle with physicality at the next level, especially early on in his career. So because of that, he's really going to have to be off the line of scrimmage almost all the time. And I'm not sure his route tree is complex or diverse enough for him to be an every down wide receiver year one. However, there is a good bit of upside here. This is not someone that would surprise me in a pass-heavy offense like what Sean Payton typically runs, eclipses the 1,000-yard mark fairly often. So I do think there's a good amount of upside for this pick, which is why it's an A-. I do really like the selection. We're going to kind of go through these next few picks here relatively quickly. Chris Abrams-Drain, a cornerback out of Missouri. Not sure exactly where he's going to play. He could be on the outside, could be on the inside in the slot, or perhaps even a potential move to safety. However, I did have a 5th-round grade on him. He is someone who I think can develop into a starting caliber player. Your other 5th-round selection, Audric Estime, a running back out of Notre Dame. I had an undrafted free agent grade on him. This is a pretty big reach, in my opinion. That being said, I think he could potentially find a role as a short yardage back, or potentially maybe as pass protecting, because he is a big boy. So he could be pretty good in that sort of a role as well. And the NFL is moving towards a more power run-based play action pass sort of league now. So maybe that short yardage, quote unquote, back, as we've come to call those sort of players, where pass catching isn't necessarily a skill that he has, maybe that doesn't mean as much in the NFL going forward. But for right now, it does. And the grade's a C for me. Devon Vele, a wide receiver out of Utah, big-bodied. I think he's 6'4" and like 210. Special teams upside. I don't think that because he's a wide receiver that he won't play on special teams. I think he will. Utah's got a good culture going around in there and has sent a lot of players into the NFL at all kinds of different positions. Final pick, Nick Grulio, an interior offensive lineman out of South Carolina. I had a 7th-round grade on him as well, so the grade is a B. If you want to hear my overall thoughts on the draft class, as well as giving the draft class as a whole a grade, you can go ahead and skip to the end of this video. It will be marked in the description, and also just, I think there will be chapters on this video. However, if you don't want to do that, you can go ahead and stick around and hear what I think about your 3 rival teams, as well as listing some of the best picks in this division for the NFL draft. Next team on the docket here, the Los Angeles Chargers. And this is a draft class that I really, really liked. Not necessarily because everything was a home run, but you didn't really reach on anybody. There's one reach here on the screen that you can see, which is a grade lower than a B, would technically be a reach. However, you kind of just sat there and just took a bunch of players that I had graded right where they were graded until the last 3 picks of the draft, 6th, 7th round. But overall, this is a really, really good class. And I'm going to go ahead and start with Joe Alt here, the first pick, tackle out of Notre Dame. I had a top 5 grade on him. Really, really like Joe Alt. I actually think he's my 2nd highest graded offensive tackle ever. He's probably going to move to right tackle, which, again, I'm not particularly a fan of switching sides of the offensive line, especially if they've never done it before, which I don't believe Joe Alt has done. And just to be completely honest with you, I'd rather move Rashawn Slater to right tackle, because I know for a fact he's going to be able to do that at a high level, and I don't know what Joe Alt is going to do as a right tackle. However, I do think he's still going to be a very, very good player. I think Jim Harbaugh is going to come in and try to get that run-first power offense going, especially with Greg Roman calling plays for this team. But a very, very good player. He's a massive, just human being in general, and a good athlete for the position. He's not like Penei Sewell or, Taylor Lewan or somebody like that, but he's a very, very, very athletic player as well. Your 2nd round selection was Ladd McConkey, a wide receiver out of Georgia. I had a top 40 grade on him. You took him between picks 21 and 40. That means that this is a pick at value. And I like the fact that you're taking a wide receiver here. I would have maybe preferred someone with a bigger body, because I don't believe in Quentin Johnston at all anymore. Was not particularly a big fan of him when he came out. I think I had a top 50 grade on him. But now that we've kind of seen him, he looks not good. Now, maybe he could turn it around. Maybe he can't. I don't know. But there, you got some bigger body receivers later on in the draft, which was good. However, Ladd McConkey, top 40 grade, very, very good route runner, very clean player in and out of breaks. Pushed himself back for the SEC championship game. Really probably shouldn't have played, but he did. He wanted to be out there to compete, so Jim Harbaugh likes those kinds of players. It's just a good all-around selection. They desperately needed a wide receiver after trading away Keenan Allen and cutting Mike Williams. I think you cut Mike Williams. Either way, I don't remember if you traded him or you cut him. I'm pretty sure you cut him. But desperately needed a wide receiver. Added one here that I think is going to be able to be effective from day one. Your 3rd round pick, 69th overall, was Junior Colson, a linebacker out of Michigan. And I had a top 50 grade on him. You got him after pick 50, meaning that this is a pick after value, which is a B+. This is only one tier down, so it's a B+. I really liked Junior Colson. I think he was my Mike linebacker 3. I'm not entirely positive, but I think he was the Mike backer 3, and also probably my 3rd or just overall linebacker at that position. But big guy, but is still a good athlete. He can take on guards, and that's the way the NFL is moving. It's moving back towards power run game. And if you're going to be able to stop the power run, then you're going to have linebackers where their first two digits of their weight start with 2 and 4 or higher. And Junior Colson fits that direction that the NFL is going in. And I just think he's a modern type of linebacker as well. I do think he can be effective in coverage. I do think he's a good linebacker as well, just being able to move around and go sideline to sideline, north, south, east, west. Good all-around player who's going to be an impact starter for this team in year one. Your fourth round selection was Justin Eboigbe, an interior defensive lineman out of Alabama. Came off the edge quite a bit as a player at Alabama. However, I think he's likely to move inside at the next level. I had him graded as a 3 technique. He's a very, very good player. I think he's going to provide a ton of upside as an interior pass rusher and potentially a disruptor as well in the run game. Not really sure how much upside there is for the run game, but I do think he's going to be an effective pass rusher from the interior at the next level. Could be someone that's going to have to make his living on the outside going up against tackles in the run game and kicking inside to rush the passer in more obvious passing situations. But a good all-around player that fits the defense that they're trying to establish here in LA. Your next selection, your first of 2 fifth-round picks that were both defensive backs. Tarheeb Still, a corner out of Maryland, was a pick at value for me. I had him graded as a 5th-round corner, a good all-around player who I think does have the upside to potentially develop into a starting caliber corner. However, the next pick, 3 picks later at 140, you guys selected Cam Hart out of Notre Dame. And actually, looking at the graphic right now, I forgot to put DB, but I was going to put DB because I'm not sure if he's a safety or an outside corner. But he's very big, a very good athlete as well. I think he's listed at 6'3", 205. Good athlete, tall, lanky player, has a ton of upside in press man, which is what I do believe the Chargers will primarily be running defensively. So he could end up being a corner, or he could end up converting to safety. Either way, I had a 4th-round grade on him. This is a pick after value in the 5th round. The grade is a B+. Your lone 6th-round selection was Kamani Vidal, a running back out of Troy. Not the end of the world, but I did have a 7th-round grade on him as a running back. Took him in the 6th round. Little bit of a reach, so the grade is a B- for me. Your 2 7th-round selections I really, really liked. At 225, you took Brendan Rice, the son of Jerry Rice, out of USC. And I had a 4th-round grade on him. I think he has potentially wide receiver 2 upside. I think he's a physical player who can win in contested catch situations, as well as having the skill to get open by running routes. I think this is an X receiver that I was talking about early, where maybe you should have taken a bigger bodied receiver earlier on in the draft. However, that wasn't really the strength of this draft class. There was a lot more players that were like shifty and smaller. This draft class at 34, you could have taken A.D. Mitchell, which is probably what I would have preferred. However, looking at it right now, it doesn't matter that much because you got a player that can fill a similar sort of role, although not nearly as well as I think A.D. Mitchell is going to play, but in Brendan Rice, as well as another guy that I had a 5th-round grade on in Cornelius Johnson as well. I like Cornelius Johnson a lot. I think he's an NFL caliber wide receiver. My comp for him was Josh Reynolds. I think he's someone who could potentially move into the slot. I think he could be an X. I think he could be a Z at the next level, as well as offering quite a bit on special teams. Not necessarily as a returner, probably not going to ask him to do that, but he's a very, very good athlete. One of the most underrated athletes just in terms of athleticism in this draft class. So you can put his ass on kickoff and punt return and kick return and just have him be an athlete out there. And I think that that is likely where he's going to add value to this team in year one. But overall, this is a tremendous draft class filled to the brim with players that are going to help this team in year one, as well as intriguing pieces that could develop into starting caliber or high impact rotational players moving forward. If you want to hear what I think about this draft class overall, as well as everybody else's draft class in your division, then you can go ahead and skip to the end of this video to that section, or you can stick around through the next two teams, as well as my best picks section as well. Up next on the docket is the Las Vegas Raiders, and this is a really good class for me, outside of one pick, which we'll get to in a moment. Your first selection was Brock Bowers, a tight end out of Georgia. Brock Bowers is currently my number 2 rated tight end of all time, I think. I had a top 10 grade on him. He was probably my number 3, maybe 4. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at who I had graded as far as top 10 wide receivers. I know Rome Odunze was there, but I don't remember if I would have had Odunze higher or Brock Bowers higher. Just in terms of receiving weapons, though, he was probably my number 3 option behind Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison. This is a instant impact plug and play weapon for this offense. They've already got other pieces that I like as well. Jacoby Myers, obviously Devonta Adams is still very, very good. And now you've got yourself a tight end that can be really good, as well as that play action running a game. And you may or may not have the QB of this team going forward with Aiden O'Connell. I would lean more towards not, but all 6 of the quarterbacks that were probably worth drafting at this point were gone. Also, I don't think Bo Nix is worth drafting at this point. So you kind of just take best player available, and that's what Brock Bowers was. This did kind of end up being the place where I did see him get mocked to a lot, because it was just kind of like, man, what are the Raiders going to do with all the quarterbacks off the board? And also, who's going to draft a tight end in the top 20? It just kind of seemed like this was the most unnatural, natural fit maybe in a very long time, for just in terms of a player going to a specific team. But all in all, I think there's a very real possibility he's a Pro Bowl caliber player year one. Now, the NFC has all the tight end talent. You've got TJ Hawkinson, you've got Sam Laporta, you've got Kyle Pitts, you've got Dallas Goedert, you've got George Kittle, obviously. In the AFC, it's kind of just Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce. So if one of those two players are in the Super Bowl or decide not to participate in the Pro Bowl, that opens up a third tight end to get in. That's where I think Brock Bowers is likely going to be. I think he will be behind Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews in terms of AFC tight end rankings heading into year one. But by year 2 or 3, he might be tight end 1 in the entire NFL. He's a special talent for the position. And speaking of special talents, Jackson Powers Johnson was a top 20 grade for me. He was my number 1 interior offensive lineman by a mile. There was nobody else in his tier, in my opinion, in this draft class, because he's 320, moves really well. He's plug and play at center or guard with big time upside as well. Moves really well, natural pass protector, just an all-around really good offensive lineman that is going to add some stability to the interior here. And I love this pick short-term and long-term. Vegas is setting itself up nicely to go after a quarterback in a trade-up situation, or perhaps to pursue a veteran quarterback for a team that might be looking to blow it up in the coming years. Now, as much as I like drafting offensive linemen, especially early on in the draft, if that's a need for you, which it most certainly is for the Raiders, but I don't like reaching on players because there's been a run on tackles and you just got to take somebody. And that's kind of the vibe I get with the selection of Delmar Glaze, the tackle out of Maryland, which is your next pick here in the 3rd round. I had a 5th round grade on him. I don't necessarily see a ton of upside here with this pick. And to be entirely honest with you, he was one of the tackles in this class that I did kind of have looked at where I'm like, he might end up being a guard at the next level. That being said, right tackle is also a need for this team. You could try him out there. I don't know. I didn't like him enough to take him here inside the top 100. I had a 5th round grade on him, so that's a 2-tier reach, which is why the grade is a C+. Moving on to your 4th round selection, DeCamerion Richardson, a corner out of Mississippi State University. I liked him. Little bit of an upside prospect, kind of a height, weight, speed guy in terms of he's probably not going to give you a whole lot year 1, but this is someone who I think could develop into a very good corner and a very good player just overall for this team. He's a player who did go up against a lot of high-end receiving talent, and that high-end receiving talent did beat him fairly consistently. However, he put up a better fight than most in terms of facing these SEC wide receivers that they got going on down there. This is a good player with a fair bit of upside. And I like the pick. I had a 4th round grade on DeCamerion Richardson, so the grade is a B. Moving on to your 5th round selection, Tommy Eichenberg, a linebacker out of Ohio State. This is another guy who's a little bit of a tweener, but not in the sense that he's undersized like edge rusher, but like doesn't move too well to be a linebacker, which is kind of what most people are talking about when you say a tweener and they're listed as a linebacker. No, Tommy Eichenberg is a little bit of a tweener because he's not an old school, quote unquote, linebacker that's becoming more and more in style nowadays, but he's also not a quote unquote new age linebacker either. He's kind of stuck in between the middle there. And I think there were a lot of people that didn't really know how to evaluate him because he didn't cleanly fit. He was someone that I just kind of looked at and really liked him, especially if you go back to the 2022 tape. Like, he was getting mocked in the early 2nd round and maybe at the 1st round level before he decided to come back to Ohio State. That being said, he was never going to go that high. He's not a good enough athlete to get drafted that high at the linebacker position. Once he would have gotten to the combine, he probably would have settled into like a middle of day 2 sort of guy, a late 2nd, early 3rd round pick. I had him graded as a 4th round selection because the tape did decrease in terms of goodness from junior year to senior year here for Tommy Eichenberg, or from 2022 to 2023. And because of that, he did fall down the board a little bit. But I do think that this is a player that does have some upside in terms of actually playing the linebacker position. It would not surprise me if he ended up being the starting Mike linebacker at some point in his rookie season. Your 6th round selection was Dylan Lobb, a running back out of New Hampshire. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. There is no grade for him because I did not have a grade on him. This was not a player that I scouted. He went to New Hampshire. I didn't go all the way down the draft board to like every listed prospect that I could find. I don't have the time or resources to do that. So there are several players throughout this, usually 1 or 2 per video, that I just didn't have grades on, and he was someone that I didn't have a grade on. So I'm not going to hold it against you, but I'm also not going to give you any bonus points either. Your two seventh-round selections to bolster the secondary: Trey Taylor, box safety, likely to be a strong safety, so to speak, out of Air Force, and MJ Devonshire, a corner out of Pitt. These are both players that I had graded as draftable prospects in the 7th round, so they're both B grades for me. And this is a really, really good class overall, and it could have potentially even gotten into higher territories if Delmar Glaze wasn't the pick at 77. If you had taken somebody that I had graded in that range, because there were still tackles that I had graded like that still available when you chose him, but I don't know exactly how far that would have bumped you up. If you want to see my grade for this draft class overall, you can go ahead and skip to the end of this video here, past the best picks section, where I talk about the overall grades for each team. Otherwise, you can go ahead and stick around through the Kansas City Chiefs section and then the best picks section before we get to that. Up next, the final team of this breakdown series here, and the final team in the AFC West, the Kansas City Chiefs. Your first round selection was Xaiver Worthy, a wide receiver out of Texas. You're finally replacing Tyreek Hill. You did desperately need to add not only a deep threat, but just another wide receiver in general, and you go ahead and do that here. I had a top 40 grade on Xaiver Worthy, meaning his value as a player would be from picks 21 to pick 40, and I liked him a lot as a prospect. There were some people that didn't really like him, and I think before he broke the combine record, the general consensus was that he probably wasn't going to go round 1, which I thought was nonsense at the time, and it ended up being true. He ended up not only getting taken in the first round, but you guys actually traded up to go get him. Nevertheless, the grade is, in fact, a B, which is a pick at value because you took him between 21 and 40. Your second round selection, 63rd overall, was Kingsley Suamataia, an offensive tackle out of Brigham Young, or BYU. This is a good player. This is your left tackle of the future. A good athlete. I really, really liked him. I had a top 50 grade on him. So you're getting him after pick 50. So this is a pick after value, which means that the grade is a B+. But this is someone who I think is going to be a stalwart left tackle for you guys in the long haul. Don't necessarily see a whole lot of upside for him in terms of being like a consistent Pro Bowl caliber player, which is why I ended up going in the second round. But I think he could be someone like a Taylor Decker, just someone who's really, really solid for you at that left tackle position where you're not going to have to worry about it, assuming he's healthy. Your first of 2 fourth-round selections was Jared Wiley, a tight end out of TCU. And I had a 5th-round grade on Jared Wiley, I believe. He is a solid player. I don't think this is an heir apparent for Travis Kelce, which I think was something that I did hear at some point. I don't think that's him. This is not a very good tight end class, in my opinion. But Jared Wiley, I do think, has upside as a tight end too. I think he can block a little bit. I think he offers you a little bit in the passing game. Kind of strikes me as a jack of all trades sort of player. Master of none is the insinuation there. But all in all, it's a solid pick. It's not the end of the world. You did reach on him a little bit, in my opinion, but the 5th round was coming up pretty quick here. The grade is a B- for him, though, because it is a pick before value. However, you make up for it with your 133rd selection, Jaden Hicks, a safety out of Washington State. I had a top 75 grade on Jaden Hicks. This is a good player. This is someone who's going to come in and play right away, possibly even start for you guys. This is a really, really good player. I like him a lot. And I think he is someone who might even, in the right scheme, end up being a Pro Bowl caliber player. This is a very, very good player. It was one of my favorite players in this draft class was Jaden Hicks. Fifth round selection, 159th overall, was Hunter Nerzid, I believe is how you pronounce that name, an interior offensive lineman out of Penn State. Now, I had a 7th round grade on him. You took him in the 5th round. That means that this is a 2-tier reach. So the grade's a C+. Not a big fan of taking him here. However, I will say that with the biggest grain of salt you've ever seen stuck in my mouth, because you guys scout offensive linemen tremendously well. So maybe I'm missing something with that pick here. Your 6th round selection, the last selection that I actually had a grade on, is Kamal Haddon, a cornerback out of Tennessee. Good player. I like him. I had a 7th round grade on him. I think he has the chance to offer solid depth and special teams upside as well. The grade was a B- because I did have a 7th round grade on him, and you selected him in the 6th round. Your last pick, 248th overall, was CJ Hansen, interior offensive lineman out of Holy Cross. I did not have a grade on him, so I'm not going to give you a grade either way for this selection. It's not going to hurt you, but it's not going to help you either. And also, it's a 7th round pick, so it wasn't going to be the end of the world to help you or hurt you either. And that is it for the Kansas City Chiefs. So let's go ahead and talk about the best picks that this division made in the NFL draft. So for the Chargers, Brendan Rice was the only A+ grade, I believe, and that's just a tremendous pickup for them. One of the best picks of the entire draft, in my opinion. Troy Franklin for the Broncos was another very, very good selection. Jackson Powers Johnson. In terms of where I had them going and where they went drafted, it's him and A.D. Mitchell in terms of guys that I had graded in the top 20 that fell to the 2nd round for no reason. So that's a very, very good pick for me. Jaden Hicks for Kansas City is someone that I just think is going to be a plug-and-play difference maker for that team. Cornelius Johnson, I think, is going to make a living in the NFL as a wide receiver and a special teamer. Getting that in the 7th round is good value, as well as Brock Bowers for the Raiders, who I think probably by year 2 is going to be a top 5 tight end in the NFL, maybe even year 1. Kingsley Suamataia out of Kansas City, or for Kansas City, rather, is the last pick in the best picks section. Very, very good player who I think is going to be a stalwart left tackle for them going forward. Now that the best picks are done, let's go ahead and grade the draft classes as a whole. And let's go ahead and start with Denver and then work our way up to the good draft classes. Yeah, the first pick fucked you. I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it. That pick, the Bo Nix pick, screwed your entire draft class, because the draft class wasn't that bad, but it kind of was, because Bo Nix was that bad. As I said, this is the last video in the series. I'm pretty sure Bo Nix is the only player I had graded with an F in this entire draft class. I'm not even positive I had anybody with a D grade either. This was just a massive reach for me. Now, I gave you in that section sort of a positive sort of tilt on it before I got into the why I didn't like the pick. But the positive aspects of that pick do not offset the potential negatives of that pick, because I don't see franchise quarterback upside with Bo Nix. I think he could be someone like a Jimmy Garoppolo in a best case scenario, where it's like the rest of the team is so good you might be able to win a Super Bowl or make it to a Super Bowl because the rest of the team is so good. The rest of the draft class is pretty okay. It probably, if you didn't take Bo Nix, if you took somebody else, it probably would be a B or a B-. But that pick was so infuriating because everybody knew it was going to happen. And it was so obviously a reach for a need. And it might have a serious detrimental impact on the legacy of Sean Payton, which is not something I'm rooting for. Kansas City, grade was a B. You had a couple of really good picks, in my opinion, but you also had a couple of picks where it was a little bit of a reach. All in all, I get balances out. I did kind of teeter between a B and a B plus for you guys. Ultimately settled on a B. I think you hit for par with this draft class, which means that it was a good draft class. I liked it. The Raiders, if you didn't draft Delmar Glaze, you'd probably at least be an A. You might be an A plus. And I think, depending upon who you drafted at that spot, could have passed the Chargers with an A grade. Now, ultimately, you didn't do that. You took Delmar Glaze, which is why you're an A minus. Love the rest of the draft class, though. And the kings of the division in terms of draft classes, in my entirely uneducated opinion, is the Los Angeles Chargers. I gave you guys an A. Only thing holding you back from an A plus was the fact that you kind of just hit for par in the early rounds. Now, that being said, I probably wouldn't change any of your picks. I'd have to go back and look at who was available in each pick. Like, maybe if you took A.D. Mitchell, then this is an A-plus class instead of Ladd McConkey. But I'm not mad that you selected Ladd McConkey. This is a very, very, very good draft class for you guys. And overall, clearly the best in the division, in my opinion. And one of the best classes overall as well. But that's just me. And what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. So at this point, I'd like to remind you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagree with it at any point, or you just have something to say, go ahead and leave a comment down in the comment section below. And now with the outro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's that I'll see you next time.